From Studio 3B in Rockefeller Center, here is Jane Pauley.
Good evening. They've all but replaced the old station wagon. Soccer moms and dads all across the country drive them. In fact, roughly 1 out of every 10 cars sold in America is a minivan. They're the new family car. But have you ever wondered how well a minivan will protect you and your family if you're in a serious accident? Well, it's a good question. And the answer may depend on what make and model you're in. Tonight, see for yourself as Chief Consumer Correspondent Lee Thompson brings you this Dateline exclusive.
What these tests show is that in some of these minivans, the chance of an injury are high.
Dateline cameras are behind the scenes at one of the most modern automobile crash test centers in the world.
It's not even budget.
Researchers here at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety are trying to understand why one family minivan can look like this, while another looks like this, all in the same test.
There's just no room left back down here. I believe that that foot is separated from the leg.
Load it up and have a ball.
The commercials say they're the perfect family car for the 90s. Millions on the road, many driven by mothers with their kids. So how well would a minivan protect you in a serious crash at 40 miles an hour?
Other way.
The Institute is about to find out.
Boy, that's right on the money.
It's funded by insurance companies and says its goal is to cut the cost of insurance claims by making cars safer. It will be testing some of the most popular minivans in America. The Dodge Grand Caravan, the Ford Aerostar, the newly designed van from General Motors, the Pontiac Transport. 9 minivans in all. Every one of these vans meets federal regulations. The question is, can they pass a test the government doesn't do? 2 years ago, the Institute began what it calls a revolutionary new series of crash tests. Very different from the government's. The government tests cars by running them head-on into a flat wall. The force spread evenly across the front. But in any junkyard, you'll see many accidents don't happen that way. So the Institute tests cars by hitting a wall off-center. Offset, it's called, concentrating the forces on just one side. The test is carefully designed to simulate what happens if 2 cars hit like this, driver to driver at 40 miles an hour.
We've chosen the speed that is representative of serious real-world crashes.
And the Institute's Brian O'Neill says some cars do well in the new test.
This is the Ford Windstar. This is by far the best performer.
There's plenty of damage, but O'Neill says it's distributed around the driver, not into him. The safety cage holds. Any injuries at all to the dummy?
The injury measures on this dummy were all low, indicating that there was no significant risk of injury to any body region.
The Ford Windstar survives this crash. No serious injuries, not even to the legs. But how well will the other minivans hold up?
Torso angle?
The Institute bought these brand new minivans right off dealers' lots. Each one will be tested at the same speed, same angle, same conditions. Dateline had no say in how the cars were chosen, tested, or evaluated.
The car is good.
3, 2, 1.
This is the Dodge Grand Caravan, the top-selling minivan in America, at 40 miles an hour.
There is major intrusion. This means that the chances of major leg and foot injuries in this crash are very, very high.
The Institute says part of the floor near the pedals is rammed back more than a foot. And the news from sensors in the dummy is not good.
Both legs.
Both left and right.
Watch the front tire. The Institute says the structure of the van causes the crash forces to be focused on the feet.
As a result, both of the lower legs of the dummy indicated the risk of a serious injury.
Would both legs have been broken?
We think that in this crash, both legs would have been broken.
Remember, the Ford Windstar protected the dummy's legs. In the same test, the Dodge Caravan didn't. This is the Chevrolet Astro, also called the GMC Safari.
It's jammed in there.
The floor has buckled, tipping the driver's seat forward.
This vehicle has almost got his back broken, if you know what I mean. It's come up and buckled.
In slow motion, you can see how the airbag still manages to cushion the head. But at the feet, the floor is rammed back as much as 15 inches. The door jams so tight, it has to be cut open. The Institute says one leg is probably broken. But remember, this dummy is the size of an average man. What would have happened if this had been a woman, shorter and lighter?
The shorter woman would presumably have the seat further forward, so there would be even less space. As the seat's pitching forward, the steering wheel is coming back and up. This is a problem when we're losing what we call the survival space.
This is the Aerostar, an older design from Ford. Remember, the minivans are being tested at 40 miles an hour.
This is extremely unusual because the steering wheel is in the lap of the driver.
The steering wheel has snapped off. In slow motion, you can see it happen.
The steering column going upward as the driver's face is going forward into the airbag. It bottoms out the airbag and actually breaks the steering wheel off the column.
But amazingly, O'Neill says, the airbag still manages to catch the head and cushion the blow just enough.
The forces on the driver's head were too high, but they were not high enough to produce a very serious injury.
Says a lot about airbags, doesn't it?
Absolutely, because this is what airbags are all about.
Again, the door has to be pried open. Measurements show the floor has been rammed back as much as 15 inches. The computer says the left leg is probably broken. The Institute says this minivan fared even worse, the Toyota Previa.
This is the worst we've seen, I think. This is just looking terrible. I mean, this steering column is almost up in the roof.
And the seatbelt has allowed the dummy to slip down, the legs wedged against the dashboard. One is probably broken. And just watch what happens to the dummy's head.
The driver, dummy in this crash, got some high forces on the head and the neck, troubling forces. It's hard to predict precisely what kind of injury that would produce, but there would be head and neck injury in this crash.
Ironically, the man in charge of these tests owns a minivan like this one. Now he's selling it.
When I saw the results of this test, I decided this is not a vehicle for my family.
Remember, there was a minivan that did well in this test. The Ford Windstar protected every part of the body. In the Toyota Previa, the Institute says there's a chance the head, neck, and legs all were injured. But the Institute says even worse than the Previa is this brand new design from General Motors, the Pontiac Transport.
Looks like massive amounts of intrusion. We've got the chin of the dummy on the steering wheel, which isn't good.
The wheel is under the chin.
See the steering wheel rim here?
The slow motion film shows the dummy's head snapping back.
The structure of the vehicle just collapses. It's obvious from his head motion that it's hit the steering wheel.
General Motors says this is one of the few vans in which the seam welds, which hold sections of the car together, didn't separate. But the Institute says the floor has been rammed back as much as 19 inches. That's more than any other van. The dummy's left leg is trapped.
It's not even budging.
It won't come free, even with a crowbar.
It's not moving, is it?
Technicians finally take the dummy apart at the knee just to get it out. But there's a problem. One of the speed readings for this test is too high.
I got 41.4.
It's only 1.5 miles over test speed at the most, but the damage is so severe, the Institute decides it must do the test again. This is another transport. This time, the speed readings are perfect. But the damage is similar.
Massive structural collapse.
The dummy's left leg is trapped again.
Well, this is really bad because the ankle is actually detached from the foot. I believe that's completely snapped off. So the loads on the dummy have been such that the metal leg, this is not a bone leg, this metal leg is snapped off.
And on the slow motion film, watch carefully.
What this crash illustrates is that when the compartment fails completely, as it's done here, and is collapsing all around you, the restraint systems can't offer much protection.
O'Neill says the head snaps back. The survival space collapses so much that the steering wheel is driven right through the airbag into the dummy. This time, the injury readings are even more serious.
A major injury to the neck, to the cervical region.
Is it possible that the person in this crash might have been killed?
Well, we can never say for certain, just based on dummy measurements, but the forces were certainly high enough that the injuries could have produced a fatal injury.
General Motors declined to talk about this test on camera. But in a letter, GM said to assure overall safety at a variety of speeds, it ran 72 crash tests on its minivan, including an offset test at 35 miles an hour. GM wrote, the minivan performed very well, but declined Dateline's request to release pictures of the test or the specific results. GM and the other automakers reminded us that all their vans meet or exceed federal safety standards, and they include safety features to help avoid accidents. The car companies have also criticized the Insurance Institute, saying it has a vested interest and cares more about cutting insurance claims than the added cost of building safer cars, that it puts too much emphasis on this one crash test. But most of all, the automakers said the Institute's test was too fast.
I would have to classify it as a ultra-high-speed test compared to the types of crashes that happen in the real world.
George Parker represents the International Association of Automobile Manufacturers. Are you saying that people don't have accidents at 40 miles an hour?
There are very rare instances of crashes at that speed. You're probably talking less than 5%, maybe even less than 2% of all crashes, offset crashes, happen at that speed.
General Motors says it's even more rare. Only about 0.04% of all the accidents the federal government tracks, and that designing cars to withstand high-speed crashes could actually contribute to injuries in more frequent low-speed accidents. The Institute says it picked the 40-mile-an-hour speed because among fatal front-end accidents, that speed is common. About half of deaths happen faster and half slower than 40. Tomorrow, the Insurance Institute releases its official rankings. The Ford Windstar with no injuries gets a good, but after that, a sharp drop. 4 vans rated marginal: the Mazda MPV, Dodge Grand Caravan, Honda Odyssey, Nissan Quest, and these rated poor: the Chevrolet Astro, Ford Aerostar, Toyota Previa, and last on the list, the Pontiac Transport. It's also called the Oldsmobile Silhouette and the Chevrolet Venture. If the Ford Windstar can protect passengers adequately at 40 miles an hour, then why can't all these other minivans do as well?
But I think that's not the point. I think the point is that if you are a potential purchaser or owner of one of these vehicles, that I would be very cautious about putting a lot of importance to the results of this test, because these vehicles do well in the real world.
Brian O'Neill agrees that compared to some other cars, minivans do not have as many deaths and injuries. But he says it's not because of the way they're built, it's because the people who drive minivans are middle-aged moms and dads, statistically some of the safest drivers on the road.
Minivans have a good on-the-road record because of their drivers. What we're saying, however, is if you're driving one of these and you're unfortunate enough to be in a collision, some of them aren't going to offer the protection they should be offering.
The automakers say the Insurance Institute runs its tests to get publicity, and they note the tests are not used to set the car insurance rates you pay. But in spite of the criticism, the federal government wants to develop its own offset test, similar to the one you've just seen.